Do you want to hear what the secret of Jewish wealth is? Do you want to be rich? Listen to this video. Look, our sages say in our Holy Torah that whoever wants to become wealthy should give the tithe. Basically, the tithe, in very general terms, you have to study it in depth, but broadly speaking, if a person earns 100, he has to give 10 out of 100, 10%. Now, our sages, in the tractate of Avot of our patriarchs, say that a safeguard for wealth is the tithe. That is to say, the Jew who gives the tithe becomes wealthy. That is a divine promise. Now, something very important to know is how to give the tithe. First, the person you give the tithe to must clearly be in need. And the person to whom you give the tithe has to be someone impeccable in terms of personal qualities. Someone honest, someone you know for sure is an honest person who will put that money to good use. That's fundamental, because someone who gives money to a person who isn't honest obviously isn't fulfilling the divine precept of giving tzedakah, as it's called in Hebrew, which means social justice, or more simply giving charity. Now, it's very important to know that there are very detailed laws and very high levels about how to give charity. Tzedakah means social justice in Hebrew. There are 8 levels of charity, with the highest level being the top. It's, for example, someone you see who has become poor or is becoming poor. They're not asking for alms yet, they're not asking for charity, but you can tell that person, for example, is falling on hard times financially or economically. For example, maybe their clothes aren't like they used to be, a bit worn out, or maybe they had to sell some of the belongings they had. Basically, you can tell that this person is becoming poorer. In this case, it's very important to help so that they don't completely fall financially, economically, and financially. And in parentheses, let me say they shouldn't fall emotionally, because someone who becomes poorer will also likely, unfortunately, fall emotionally. Therefore, you must help them. Helping can mean giving a loan so they can recover. For example, if they have a business, give them a loan so that person can buy merchandise or hire someone to help them. Basically, not allowing them to fall financially. Another way is, for example, if they don't have a job, recruit them to your own job, or find them a job that matches the qualities that person has. That is, help them get out of that financial mess. I'm going to list some of the rankings, as they say, list the levels of charity. That's very important. It's also very important to give charity, for example, without the person, a very high level of charity is to give charity without the recipient knowing the giver, and without the giver knowing the recipient. For example, one knows that there is a charity fund that is ethically impeccable. The people who manage that fund are excellent, honest, and you know for sure that this is the case. So you give that money to that charity fund. Therefore, you don't know who receives that money, but you know that the money goes to people who really need it. And the people who receive that money don't know who it's from. Therefore, they don't feel ashamed when they see you on the street. For example, something very interesting that's in the laws about when you, for instance, give a loan is that, for example, if you give a loan and the person giving the loan knows that the other person can't pay it back, you should try to avoid that person. That is, for example, if the person is walking toward me, obviously you have to greet them or say hello. Of course, but if there's a chance that the person doesn't see you so they don't feel embarrassed, you should try to avoid them. Do you understand? I mean, don't avoid them if the person sees you. Obviously, if you see them, greet them, because otherwise they'll think you're offended, and that's not good. If the person doesn't see you and you spot them from afar, you might say, well, I'm going into this place. He won't see me, but if he does, won't he feel pressured to repay me quickly? That's important. How the Torah, how God takes care of even the smallest detail of a person's honor so that they are not embarrassed. That's a very elevated, high level of charity, though slightly lower. It's when the giver knows who they're giving the money to, but the receiver doesn't know who they're receiving it from. For example, our sages. In the past, for example, there was a custom, for instance, when there were people in need, they would give money, like they would give the money backwards without seeing who they were giving it to. The recipient knew which sage gave him the money, but the sage didn't know who received it. It's a very high level, that is basically, it's giving, but without knowing who you're giving to. Then another level, a little less elevated, is when both the giver and the receiver know who each other is. For example, there's a poor person, someone in need who needs money. You go and give them the money, both know who gave and who received the money, obviously. A level that is also less elevated is, for example, giving money. For example, if someone was rich but became poor, giving them money, right? In short, it honors that person who used to be rich. Maybe the person who gives doesn't have that money to, doesn't have, I don't know, a lot of money to give them. Yeah, but it would be right if you can give them not just a few cents, but give a monetary amount that honors the person who became poor but used to be rich. Also, for example, it's very important when you give charity to say a kind word, a word of encouragement, to say, God willing. Will you return with new strength to the economic level you were at before? Trust in God, I will help you. That is to give words of encouragement and to do it with a smile. Our sages say that when someone gives charity and gives blessings, they receive blessings from heaven. And the lowest level is to give charity, but just a minimal amount, and maybe with a sour face, not smiling, giving it as if reluctantly. It's still charity since the person helped someone in need, but it's clearly at a much lower level than what we discussed before, because he didn't give it with a joyful heart and didn't encourage or motivate that person. Obviously, the act of giving is very important and valid, but we also have to understand that there are higher levels. We should aspire to be on the podium of the higher levels we mentioned at the beginning. And this is what our Holy Torah says, which enriches a person. That is, the person who gives the tithe becomes enriched. And it's very important to strengthen ourselves in this, because our sages say that whoever has mercy for others, God also has mercy for him. It's very important. When someone does something here also from the heavens, God gives us that blessing. So God willing, may we have the merit to always be attentive, to notice if there is someone who is close to us or maybe far from us who needs something. Leaving without waiting wasn't originally planned. Not to wait for the person in need to ask, but to take the initiative and bring them that money before they ask. Give and try to do it in the most delicate way possible. Protect the honor of the person in need. And this is very important for our good qualities, both on a personal level and on a community level. May we always have the merit to we gave, and if we receive, it is to give again. All the abundance that God gives us, may we have the merit to be like a very clean and transparent conduit, so that we can always give to the whole world with great joy and a good heart. Many blessings.